So we're both architecture students at Cal Poly Pomona, and we decided to take a topic studio in our fourth year of school, and the topic was space architecture. And so for this particular studio, our teachers selected a space-based solar power station as the program for the design, and so that was loosely what our designs are based off of.
What sort of things have you guys learned throughout doing this project?
The first couple of weeks was like a crash course in the norms of space architecture, how you get things into orbit, how you get things out of orbit, kind of thing. So it was a lot of learning in the first couple of weeks, very overwhelming coming from, your typical architecture degree, very conventional. So it was a big challenge, but it was a great learning experience. So after we got that, we started to go into designing, which I found to be a little bit more rigid than our other studios because we wanted it to be somewhat feasible.
And just because of all the extreme parameters that you have in space,
right.
Just speaking in terms of things like radiation and gravity are something that you don't ever have to deal with in terrestrial architecture. And so trying to cope with issues that you come across in deep space makes the whole design process a lot more constricted, but at the same time a lot more open. So there's possibilities and also lots of parameters, obviously. So it was a very interesting process.
What were some of the things that came up that were surprising to you guys that would be struggles in order to make it work?
For me, it was a big adjustment to scale because there was no reference to anything in orbit. So because our actual station is very small compared to the solar umbrella, so that was like hard for me to adjust to, but also just the idea of space within our station as a volume rather than on the ground plane like it normally is in terrestrial architecture. So it was a little different to think about that. There's no up or down or right or left side in these spaces. So that was something to get used to, I guess.
I think another difficult aspect of it was probably the way you have to construct things in space, because we're dealing with conceptually something that's a kilometer in diameter. So it's an infrastructure it's unfathomably large, and to have to conceptually decide how you would construct that from small pieces that have to somehow be lifted out of Earth's atmosphere into space. It was really difficult to wrap your head around that and sort of come to terms with that even being a possibility. So I think that was a difficult step, and it was just part of the process, I guess.
With that being said, did that affect at all how you guys designed the pieces of this station because of the weight limits that are available?
Definitely.
Right.
There was a lot of discussion between, sending payloads up and having it being completely constructed from Earth materials, and then versus, going to a meteor and mining things and bringing it back to the station. But it was there was a lot of talk about 3D printing and how it kind of constructs itself too.
Right.
So
there was a big focus on the possibility of most of the construction happening in space, as opposed to the way systems work typically now, where most of the modules are built in full on Earth and then launched into space. Most of the people that we were talking to who have experience in this field were sort of pushing us towards the idea of constructing the pieces themselves in space. So it was a lot of sending up raw materials as opposed to completed modules, and using the raw materials themselves to create things in space. So it was definitely interesting.
So what is the most important thing that people need to know about what your guys' school does? Because this isn't the only space project that you guys have worked on in the past.
Right.
We've had a couple of years of this now where there's one teacher in particular. His name is Michael Fox, and he has a sort of obsession with space architecture, and so he really likes to teach this studio. And it's actually we just got a grant from NASA to do another space studio next year, and so that's going to start in the fall. And I think it's just important that people understand that this is going to become a very viable field in the near future. It's something that we learned just from working on it, is that there's going to be a huge push for this in the very near future, and people are going to have to start addressing these issues. And so there's going to be an entirely new field opening up with a lot of possibilities in terms of jobs and things like that. So I think that's definitely something to look forward to.
Well, after working on this project, are either or both of you inspired to continue and work in space architecture?
Absolutely. I think if we could find opportunities, it would be a great thing to do. I really enjoyed learning all of the things that we did about space and all of the things that go into constructing things in space. And so if I could make a career out of this, it would be absolutely fantastic.
It's definitely a different kind of challenge than your conventional architecture. So, yeah, very interesting. I would definitely be interested in it. So.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.